Okay, good morning, my friends. My name is Darren Gerdes. It is Monday, November 18th, 2024, and this is the Daily Brief. I just try to provide context in the war in Ukraine so that you can understand what's happening. 1,560 Russians off the battlefield. So what does that mean? Is that high? Is that low? Well, it's not in the top 10, and we had 3 or 4 days of the top 10 this last week. So this is actually down tempo compared to what it's been for the last few days. 15 tanks, 38 armored fighting vehicles, 30 artillery systems, 107 vehicles and fuel tanks. And while 1560 just, it feels high. Like remember, the average losses per day about 2 months as of about 2 months ago was about 710. So maybe it's 715, 720 a day, something like that right now. The average losses in September was 12 something. The average losses the next month was 13 something, and you're going to be seeing what it is so far this month in just a moment. But before we do that, let's look at Andrew Perpetua's losses. Here are the losses I could identify for the 14th. So he just playing catch up. He did a 12 and 13th yesterday. 14th, it looks like this. Well, look at this map. Like just, wow. 2.5, maybe 3 to 1, something along those lines. It's substantial. And then the next days, this is the 15th, it's about 1 to 1. And then on the 16th, let's see if I can get to the 16th, it's a little bit better than 1 to 1. Russian losses to Ukrainian losses. So he's been playing catch up. Did you see how small the print is? He has a lot to tabulate. It's just been thick fighting. Okay. This is the British Defense Intelligence update. The average daily Russian casualties killed and wounded in Ukraine reached a new high during October 2024, and that was after September 2024. The average daily loss rate was 1354 per day. Okay, according to the Ukrainian General Staff reporting, this is the second straight month that Russian forces have suffered new war high average daily losses. The average losses for the first 12 days. No, now remember, it was 1271 in September, then 1354 in October. The average daily losses for the first 12 days of November 2024 is 1498. From 1354 to 1498. Again, the Russians just keep coming. There's an urgency here to take whatever ground that they can possibly take, indicating that this upward trajectory is likely to continue. October 2024 has been the most costly month of the war for Russia, with a total of 41,980 losses reported by the Ukrainian General Staff, compared to the previous high of 39,000 recorded in May of 2024. Since the start of the conflict, Russia has likely suffered 70,000 casualties. And if you look at the Ukrainian estimate, it's 722,440 casualties. So 700,000 casualties. So they're pretty close. The Ukrainian and the British figures are pretty close. Over the past month, Russia has increased the tempo of offensive operations, highly likely attempting to increase the pressure on Ukrainian lines as they seek to push Ukrainian forces back on several fronts, including Kursk, Toretsk, Pokrovsk, Vuhledar. Russia will highly likely continue to experience high casualty rates over the remainder of the year, with continued dismounted infantry attacks on multiple axes through the winter. So they're going to keep pushing to the degree that they can, and nobody's surprised by this. Now, yesterday was a pretty terrible day for Ukraine. We started with this video, a terrible night for Ukraine, where we were just talking about how many missiles and drones were just sent upon Ukraine, and there was over 100 missiles, and they shot many of the missiles down, but still between missiles and drones, 40, 50-ish, something like that, still got through. Okay, so Schultz's phone call, this is Ben Wallace. He's the former UK Secretary of State for Defense in Great Britain. And he said this about Schultz's phone call. Schultz's phone call to the Kremlin was so ineffective that within a few hours, Putin launched a massive illegal attack on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. In one move, he undermined the unified Western position, showed weakness, and emboldened Russia. He really did. He was trying to help. I think he believes he was trying to help. I think he believed that was a good idea, but it wasn't. It's as if Putin is laughing at him. He has manipulated the German leader to exactly where he wants him. No tourists, but huge amounts of humiliation. I think Schultz is probably best suited to chairing a subcommittee of a local council rather than ruling a government. Well, Schultz is on the ropes. There's no doubt about that. But the aftermath for Ukraine was this. Ukraine implements widespread power cuts in most oblasts after Russia launched 210 missiles and drones on the energy infrastructure across the country. So it was pretty devastating. And there's power outages now. Most of the nuclear power plants had to reduce some capacity. It was rough. Now the hits keep coming. Commenting on today's attack, President Zelensky connected its timing to the recent diplomatic phone call between Russian President Vladimir Putin and German Chancellor Olaf Scholz. These are demonstrative Russian strikes. After calls and meetings with Putin and all the false rumors in the media about supposed restraint from strikes, Russia shows what it really is interested in, only war. And this signal should be heard in all parts of the world. I think he's right. I mean, that seems to be clear. Now let's talk about the strikes. It was limited compared to yesterday, but it was still pretty effective. 0 of 2 Iskander ballistic missiles were hit. They didn't hit either of them. 0 of 1 cruise missiles. And 8 out of 11 Shahed drones were shot down. Well, Shahed drones are pretty commonly shot down, but the ballistic missiles almost never. Now this is the Kyiv Post. Russia's horrific ballistic missile attack on the center of Odesa leaves 8 dead, many wounded. It's an open hunt of civilians on the streets of Odesa at this hour as Russians sent ballistic missiles, listen to this, loaded with cluster munition warheads into the heavily populated city center. Okay, so this was on Twitter, and Twitter had it blocked, so I can't possibly show you what this looks like on YouTube. Okay, so part of the problem is ballistic missiles are different than cruise missiles. Ballistic missiles go way up and then they come like straight down at you. And so it's very hard to hit these, but they did apparently hit them. Now, Air Defense claimed that it shot one of them down, and you can see it falling, but it still was doing damage because it still had the warhead attached. So you're going to see where it's falling. You're not going to see it hit. You're not going to see it blow anything up, but okay, the moment Ukraine's air defense shot down a Russian missile in the Odesa region, locals captured footage of the falling debris. So here you are, and see it right there. There it is. So it's falling to the ground, and you're not going to see it actually explode or anything, but yeah, it's hard to hit. And they hit it, but it still did damage. Okay, now what was Russia's response? Russian propagandists are lying, claiming that they hit a military dormitory in Odesa. Of course, they won't show their flock the footage of civilian bodies lying around, which is the kind of thing that I can't show you that's blocked even on X. Okay, meanwhile, Turkish President Erdogan is set to present his peace plan for Russia's war against Ukraine at the G20 summit in Brazil. His proposals involve freezing hostilities at the current positions. That's not good. Erdogan proposes creating a demilitarized zone in Donbass and stationing international troops there. That's also not good. Like, why does it have to be in Ukrainian territory? Why not in Russia? Or at least 50-50 if you were going to do such a thing. Turkish officials acknowledge that such a proposal will be difficult for Ukraine to accept, but believe that it's the most realistic approach. It's also going to be difficult for the Russians to accept. Russia rejects the idea of a frozen conflict along the front line. And that's good because then Ukraine won't have its arm twisted into a terrible settlement. The conditions set by President Putin for halting hostilities remain unchanged, says Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov. Okay, meanwhile, young men from the occupied territories of Ukraine are being sent to serve in the Russian army. This was reported by local authorities. They published photos. Putin is seizing our territory, says a Ukrainian member of parliament, and then forcing these Ukrainians to fight against their citizens. Okay, and there have been multiple reports of this sort of thing over time. Meanwhile, Russian forces recently advanced near Kupiansk, Chasiv Yar, Kharkov, and Vuldahar. Russian forces continued offensive operations in the main Ukrainian salient in Kursk Oblast, but did not achieve any advances there. Okay, Zelensky visited Pokrovsk. Pokrovsk is like the most important place for Ukraine to hold. He visited there in Donetsk region, one of the hottest combat areas of the front, and he spoke with soldiers defending the city and awarded them medals. And that's good that he's showing up in Pokrovsk. Follow me do as I do. This is the motto of the Sergeant Corps of our armed forces. Sergeants and master sergeants ensure personnel training, their motivation, take responsibility for their brothers in arms. They're the backbone of every combat unit. I'm grateful for their contribution to the strength of our army. Congratulations on Sergeant's Day of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Great motto. Follow me, do as I do. And wasn't Zelensky actually showing up? Like that's pretty impressive that he's willing to do that. Don't see Putin anywhere near the front lines. Okay, just a couple international thoughts here. Finland, a country with a long border with Russia and striking distance to crucial Russian bases such as Murmansk Naval Port, Olenna Air Base, and even St. Petersburg, joined NATO in 2023, but no Russian missiles or drones hit the country when it announced that it wants to join the alliance. Isn't that interesting? So why the double standard? What's going on here with Finland that's not going on with Ukraine? Now, yesterday we talked about how Biden authorized long-range strikes into Russia, and it was breaking news, and I talked about that yesterday. I'm going to talk about that more again later on in Three Big Stories. I'll be on UATV talking about that as well, so I'm going to save that right now. Last little bit, Darth Putin, it was nice of Biden to wait 997 days to do what people were saying should be done on day one, to announce it so that we have enough time to shift the targets out of range, probably give permission but not ammunition. I've benefited greatly from the incompetence of my enemies. There's some truth to that, and it's also more limited than we thought. Again, I'll be talking about that in the Three Big Stories segment tonight. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.